Welcome to Move or Improve with Debbie. I'm your host, Debbie Miller. And I know that many of you have thought about living outside the U.S. when you retire, but how do you decide if it's right for you? Well, I've talked to people in Costa Rica and Portugal. I have one coming up in Dubai. But today I want to talk with Jason Holland, who is an expert at retiring and living outside the U.S., even though he hasn't retired. He's young, but at any rate, how do you choose a place? How do you decide if it's right for you? How do you even get started? So many of the decisions are made using the same process that I advise you when you're choosing a new place to move in the U.S. But retiring abroad is more than just vacationing in another country. You're living there year-round in the culture of that country. But what about the nuts and bolts of getting ready for this big move? So I'm pleased to have Jason Holland as my guest today. Jason is International Living Magazine's roving Latin America editor. And he's from a military family, and he grew up in Germany and Spain, but he returned to Florida for a college and a career as a writer. But life abroad beckoned. So in 2012, he and his family made their way to Costa Rica, and they split their time between the mountains of the Central Valley and the Pacific Coast. And nearly 5 years later, they moved to Mexico, first to the white sand beaches of the Riviera Maya, and now they're enjoying life in San Miguel de Allende. He travels across Latin America, learning about the expat experience in places like Roatan, Panama, Belize, Colombia, Dominican Republic, and beyond. In all that time, he's never visited a beach bar he didn't like. Now, I don't have any tequila to share with him today, but he will share tips with you and me on how to get started on this exciting journey. Welcome, Jason.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. Good to be here.
Let's get started right away because I know people are interested. What's the personality profile of someone who would succeed in living this lifestyle? What do they need to have?
Yeah, well, I'd have to say that in all my travels, I really haven't seen just one type of person that does well living abroad or seeks to live abroad. I've met introverts, extroverts, young people, retirees, quirky people, just all sorts of people. There are people seeking adventure. There are people who fell in love with a location or a local culture on a trip, and then they decide to stay. They decide to come back and move there. There are people who want better weather. People who are mostly motivated by economic reasons. They can't afford to retire in the United States, so they're seeking a place with a lower cost of living. I'd say the only thing that brings everybody together is that you need to have the ability to get outside your comfort zone and thrive in a different culture, in a different language, and kind of adopt a new and different lifestyle.
Sounds like good advice, but so is it a good idea to make a list of what someone is looking for and how much money they have to spend on rent or healthcare or living day to day as part of the decision process?
Yeah, definitely. Moving to a different city in your state or moving across the United States is a big process, a lot of moving parts there. Moving abroad, there's even more moving parts. It's an even more in-depth, requirement for you to do your research because it's going to be a big change. You have to pick the right location. I'd like to say that you could just close your eyes and point on a map and then decide to move a place and it would all work out, but I don't think that would be the case. You really have to find the place that's right for you. And you might even decide that, moving abroad is not going to be the right move for you. So what we always say at International Living is that you have to relentlessly profile yourself and what you're looking for, and then try to match that with a destination that's out there. I will say that there really is something out there for most everybody. So what you're looking for are things like the nuts and bolts stuff, like cost of living, the availability of medical care, especially if you need certain prescriptions or specialist doctors' visits. The requirements for residence visas, the type of lifestyle in a place. Do you want kind of a rural lifestyle? Do you want to be by the beach where it's kind of a vacation feel all the time? So you can look at resources like International Living for that sort of information. You can also go to expat blogs and expat publications online, as well as join expat Facebook groups. Every kind of destination has these, online resources, often multiple resources. So you can ask questions on these forums. You can read posts to kind of get a sense of life there, and then get little information about, do they have certain types of doctors? What is the lifestyle like? So there's a lot of information out there.
Well, that sounds good. But just in general about medical, what kind of vaccinations are needed, and just kind of healthcare in general? Obviously, if someone needs a specialist, that's going to impact where they choose to go, or whether they even choose to go. But can you keep your Medicare coverage? Can you join an available national healthcare plan, or sign up for a hospital-based plan, or do you need private insurance, or just pay out of pocket? And how do they locate specialists if they need them? Just talk a little bit, because the medical reason for retiring and moving to a new location in the States is a lot based on the medical hospitals and doctors that are available in the area they want to go to. So just wondering how that compares with living overseas.
Yeah, as far as vaccinations go, it really kind of depends on the specific destination. The Centers for Disease Control has a rundown for each country basically on their website. So I'd refer people to that. Certain, places in Asia, Latin America tend to have more vaccination requirements just overall. Now, as far as like general medical care abroad, it really does depend on the destination, but in a lot of places you can find very high quality care at a much lower cost than the US. We always recommend that people keep their Medicare coverage for a couple of reasons. One, just in case they return to the U.S. for whatever reason, and it could be unexpectedly. Maybe a family member falls ill. They decide that they don't like living in a certain country anymore and they want to move back. We always say keep your Medicare coverage, just in case. Now, as far as in these different countries, in most of these places, you can join the national healthcare plan as soon as you are official residents with a visa. So there's like a government-run healthcare with clinics and hospitals, and generally you pay a monthly fee or maybe an annual fee, which is pretty low cost, usually based on income. And then you can visit any clinic or hospital as needed, for treatment basically. And often they give you prescriptions for free as well once you've paid your fee. Some countries are better than others. Some, like Europe, has very well-developed healthcare systems that are very efficient. A lot of places in Latin America do too as well. Some places the national healthcare plan can be frustrating because there are wait times for non-emergency care, lack of specialist doctors. They might only be located in the biggest city in the country, for example. So that's something to keep in mind and something to examine.
So would that be places like Canada where they have longer wait times, or what are some examples of longer wait times? And
sure. So let me give you a quick.
How much time is the longer wait?
Sure. So let me use Costa Rica, for example. They have a system called CAHA, which is the National Healthcare Plan. Once you become a resident, you join CAHA and you pay 7 to 11% of your monthly income to join the healthcare plan. And that would include your spouse. One person pays basically, and then your spouse joins. So you're paying about $70 to $100 generally for this national healthcare plan. There are local clinics and hospitals in the larger cities. You can get your prescriptions, but if, say, you need a knee replacement, you get put on a waiting list, and it could be a year, before you get your knee replacement. Now, if you had a heart attack, which I had a friend in Costa Rica who did have a heart attack, he went straight to the local hospital. He was seeing a cardiologist right then. They had the special cardiac unit come to the ER. They took care of him, stabilized him, transferred him to the nearest, largest hospital, the best hospital in the country. He stayed there for 2 weeks. Basically was in intensive care for a little bit, then was put in, he was being observed for a couple of weeks, and, he only paid, $75 a month for his health care, and all that emergency care, the hospital stay was no cost after he paid his monthly fee. But, if it's a non-emergency, you're kind of put on a waiting list, and it could be months, it could be a year before you get care in those cases.
Interesting. It's a totally different concept from the U.S., that's for sure. But what tips do you have for people just in handling the change and learning a new culture? If they don't speak Spanish, or if they don't speak French, or if they don't speak Portuguese, Will it get frustrating for them? Or, I mean, I know there are apps out there that translate for you, but it's a little different having to speak into an app and then wait for it to translate and give it to the other person rather than conversing just very casually with people living there.
Yeah. Well, when you move abroad, you're in a new country, a new culture, often a new language. So you have to kind of be adaptable. You have to kind of be willing to learn, be willing to be a little bit embarrassed at times if you misspeak or you don't know a cultural norm. Standing in line could be very different. The way that people approach personal space, for example, could be very different. I've been on buses in Latin America where I was like, there's no way that everybody can fit in this bus that's waiting in line. And of course we were in there, along with the chickens and all the stuff. So you have to be willing to be adaptable. You can't go in with an attitude of, I'm going to change everything to make myself more comfortable. You have to change yourself and kind of adopt kind of a new attitude. You probably will have to learn at least some of the new local language. Yes, you can use apps, you can use Google Translate, all that good stuff. Have your handy little pocket dictionary with you. That's going to help. You don't have to be fluent, is what I always tell people. You don't have to think that you have to master a language to get by, because really, if you learn some key words and phrases, you're going to be able to get a lot done. You're going to find that many people around the world do speak English at varying levels. So if you go to the bank, if you go to a hospital, if you're trying to order at a restaurant, if you're trying to get directions or whatever, often there's going to be somebody that speaks at least a little English, and maybe with your mastery at whatever level of the local language, their English, you can kind of make it work. And I always also tell people it's really the polite thing to do, to learn as much as you can, because people really do appreciate when you try to speak their local language, even if all you say is, hello, how are you, how's your family? That's often good enough, because people appreciate that you're trying. And it's going to be a much richer experience too, because you can interact with your neighbors, the shopkeepers, people you meet, and you kind of get to know more about what's going on around you if you can speak at least a little bit of the local language.
Is it better to settle in a location where there's a lot of expats, or try your luck at living with more of the locals, so to speak? Or how is that set up overseas in many places? Do the expats live among the locals, or do they tend to somewhat segregate, or how's that set up?
Yeah, it kind of depends. It's all personal preference. I'd say generally, people are very welcoming, both the local community and the expat community. You can mingle with locals as much as you want. You can also easily join the local expat groups. And there's really, as far as the mingling and the segregation, it kind of goes both ways. In some locations, for example, let me give you Puerto Aventuras, which is in the Riviera Maya of Mexico. This is a planned community with restaurants, a commercial district with shops, condos, homes, a marina, resort hotels. It's right on the beach. It's a beautiful location. It's very much an expat enclave. A lot of people own condos there, and they come in the winter months. A lot of people live there year round, but they're definitely not mingling with locals. They're definitely in a gated community on the beach, and if you stay on this kind of resort area, your only interaction with locals are the folks that come, to work, at the resorts, or, maybe to clean your house or to do the landscaping and things like that, or the people who work at the shops and restaurants. Mm-hmm. We live in San Miguel de Allende, which is also in Mexico. We're in central Mexico, north of Mexico City. I live in a working class neighborhood. All my neighbors are Mexican. I think there's in my a 4-block section here of this town,